One of the one of the passages in chapter 4, I think, is maybe one of the strangest passages that
Sure.
you come across in all of Scripture, really. And let me just read it to you. So the context of this, of course, is Moses is on his way to Egypt, and I would love to just get your thoughts on this and help us understand it and the significance of this passage. But I'm going to read verses 24 through 26. This is in the ESV. So at a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." So he let him alone. It was then that she said, "A bridegroom of blood," because of the circumcision. All right, so help us understand that crazy passage.
I asked on the app formerly known as Twitter the other day what people wanted me to talk about in the commentary. Like, what questions did they hope I would answer? And this far and away got the most comments. So many people wondering, what in the world do we do with Exodus chapter 4? Particularly because it's jarring because God has just told Moses to go back to Egypt to deliver the people. And Moses is in the process of obeying, and God tries to kill him. So you have the problem of, like, why is God trying to kill him? And then why is God trying to kill him here in this moment when he's in the process of obeying? So yes, it's a tricky one. I have become convinced that this story is absolutely crucial to the plot of Exodus. That it's not just a vestige of old stories that they felt like they had to include because it was, had been passed down, but that structurally and literarily it's really important. Thematically, it's really important. And that we can't really understand it without reading the whole context from 18 to 31, because there are like 7 micro scenes in a row in those verses, and all of them have links with each other. There's all these repeated words that like tie the little scenes together. And then this whole block of verses in chapter 4 has all sorts of connections with chapter 18 and ties between them. I don't know if it's from every one of the 7 scenes, but most of them have ties to chapter 18. So what I didn't say earlier about the structure of Exodus comes into play here, and that is there really are 2 rescue stories in the book of Exodus. First is the rescue of Moses, and then the rescue of the nation of Israel. And there are all kinds of parallels between the 2 rescue stories. So this incident with Zipporah in chapter 4 forms the end of the Moses rescue story. She takes her place along with all the women of chapter 1 and 2 who saved Moses' life. The midwives, the daughter of Pharaoh, the daughter of Levi, his sister, all these women who conspire against Pharaoh and defy his orders and save Moses instead of putting him to death. They act in ways that prefigure what Yahweh is going to do to defy Pharaoh and save the entire nation. And there's all kinds of verbal links between them. The daughter of Pharaoh saw the basket. She heard him crying. She felt compassion for him. She's sent to get the basket. She felt compassion for him and she saves him. And in a similar way, Yahweh saw the oppression of the Israelites. He heard them crying out in their slavery. He felt sorry for them and he sent Moses to bring them out. So there's all kinds of resonance there. But back to chapter 4, one thing that I've noticed is that Zipporah gets a bad rap, as some people actually talk about her as causing the problem. Like, she is the reason why Moses hasn't circumcised his sons, because she's been resistant to it. And they read that into it because they read a certain tone into her words. "Surely you're a bridegroom of blood to me." As if it's like she's just like spitting, like, "Oh, I can't believe I had to do this. You made me do this." And she's really disgusted, rather than reading that as the pronouncement that must be made to make the ritual effective. She is a ritual practitioner. She's doing what priests do, and she somehow knows what's called for in this situation, and she knows what to say to put it into effect. Kind of like the moment in a wedding when the officiant says, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Like that's the moment where they're actually married, where the rest of the ritual ceremony kind of comes into effect. And so I think when she says, "Surely you're a bridegroom of blood to me," she's saying the thing that needs to be said to resolve the problem. And what is the problem? The problem is that Moses is going back to Egypt to lead the people out of slavery, but he is not in compliance with the one command that God gave to Abraham, which is circumcision. So he has not he's not signed on to the covenant people. And there's a lot of ambiguity about his identity in the opening chapters of Exodus. Is he a Hebrew? Is he an Egyptian? Is he a Midianite? Where does he belong? You can get a glimpse of this sense of hybrid identity or uncertainty when he has his first son and names him Gershom, which means foreigner there. And he says, I've become a foreigner in a foreign land. But it's not at all clear what he means by that. Does he mean he's become a foreigner in Midian? Or is he referring back to his time in Egypt, where he was growing up in this privileged position in the Egyptian palace, and then his identification with the suffering of the Hebrews makes him a foreigner in the palace? Like, he doesn't belong there anymore, and he's not safe and has to flee. It's not clear where his identity is. That gets resolved at Mount Sinai when God appears to him in the burning bush and says, I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That resolves Moses' identity question. But Moses has not taken the next step to say, all right, I'm in. I'm all in. And he cannot lead the people where he hasn't been willing to go himself. So God has just said to Moses that he's supposed to tell Pharaoh, this is what Yahweh says, Israel is my firstborn son. And I told you, let my son go so he may worship me, but you refuse to let him go, so I will kill your firstborn son. So that there's a pattern of fittingness or justice to this, where Pharaoh is withholding God's firstborn son, and so God is going to take aim at Pharaoh's firstborn son. And Moses still hasn't identified which camp he's in. Is he the son of Pharaoh, or is he the son of Yahweh? And so the circumcision resolves that. There's a lot of ambiguity in the Hebrew text of these 3 verses, 24 to 26. The ESV is a little bit more open-ended than the NIV, but still resolves some of the who the pronouns are referring to. So I think you read that she touched Moses' feet with the foreskin, but that's not what it says in Hebrew. It's she cut off his foreskin and touched his feet with it. And it's not clear whose feet is she touching, or even whether these are actual feet or if this is a euphemism for male private parts, which happens occasionally in the Bible. So given the nature of the surgery she just performed, I think it's possible that she is touching Moses' privates with the foreskin of their son as a way of not only circumcising their son, but kind of re-circumcising Moses, activating his circumcision as a covenant circumcision. We don't know whether he was circumcised as a Hebrew baby, if that's how the daughter of Pharaoh knows that he's a Hebrew, or if his circumcision was the Egyptian style of circumcision, which happens at puberty, not at birth, and which has nothing to do with the covenant with Abraham. There's questions about that, what she's actually doing, but I think it's possible that her action is meant to rectify whatever problem he has, being out of compliance. And so her statement, which I would translate, surely you have become a blood relative to me, not a bridegroom of blood, but a more generic relative by marriage. I think she's actually talking to Yahweh here, saying, okay, now we're in your covenant family and we weren't before. But it's ambiguous. So right. In any case, what's resolved by the end of the scene is that Moses is now compliant with the instructions to Abraham in Genesis about circumcision. So now he can lead the people. His identity has been solidified. And so now when he goes to the people and says, you all have to circumcise your sons and celebrate the Passover, and then I'll get you out of here, they wouldn't be like, well, how come you haven't done that?
Right.
Right, yeah. It seems like, I mean, every time there is like an Exodus, there's always someone who goes through as a precursor. I haven't thought about that, though, that the bridegroom of blood, she may be speaking to Yahweh at that point. I'll have to think more on that. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
It's possible.
But yeah, I mean, still, that's cool that, I mean, this really confusing story is contributing to the overall narrative by having, putting our elect, but the chosen one to bring them through the Exodus, going through some Passovers.
Yeah.